Alright, so my pick is actually something I've talked about in news videos before, but never as its own chatty face, and this absolutely deserves its own chatty face entry, because the biggest waste of money that I've ever spent on any video game thing is buying the remastered edition of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 as a bundle when that came out about 5 years ago or something. I absolutely love the first game in this franchise. I have so much nostalgia for it. It was part of my formative growing up years, and for the longest time I wanted to play it again, but it was difficult to track down because the license expired. You couldn't buy it through like official channels, and you had to buy it secondhand, and because of that the price was very inflated, and I think it went for about 20 English pounds back in the day, which is quite expensive for a last gen second-hand game, so I always avoided it, and this seemed like the thing for me because not only was it the first game remastered, but it was bundled with Ultimate Alliance 2, a game then I had never played, so I thought, brilliant, this is for me. Counted down the days for it to come out. There was no real reviews or coverage on it, there was no price even, and I got up one morning, went downstairs, bashed that thing into the search bar in the PlayStation Store and found out that it was 55 quid. 55 quid for two old games, and I thought, well, this is a bit of a surprise, isn't it? Remasters are usually a bit cheaper, but it's two games. Maybe they've, done a really good job. So I bought it anyway, downloaded them, booted up Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1, and realized that, remaster is a very generous term for it, because it's practically just a port. I don't think any work has actually been done to it. I'm sure the resolution has been bumped, but it's not like, a remaster even on the level as, Mafia 2 is probably one of the worst you can get. This was, in terms of the things that were added to it, at least on par with that, maybe even worse. But it's still a great game. It's still a good game, and I enjoyed my time with it. But if I had the choice of, paying for that bundle or getting the £55 back, I'd take the £55 every time, because then I'd just buy the original second hand. Because even though I got both, I didn't get round to playing the second one properly. I've still only played the first few hours of it, so I practically spent all this money on a single remastered game. I could have got cheaper second hand, hadn't had any improvements to it at all, and pretty much just ripped me off. Because we're in quite a good age for remasters now. We've got Crash Bandicoot, we've got Spyro, we've got Resident Evil. This is like the exact opposite of that, and somehow was more expensive. Don't know how. Don't know what Activision was doing, but they absolutely swindled me on that one.
The video game I regret throwing money at has to be Hearthstone. Now, I don't really willingly throw my money at games unless I specifically know that the developers and publishers deserve it. Like, for example, Team Fortress 2 and Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I've bloody spent so much money on keys and cases and so much guns. I'm not even going to go into how much my Steam inventory is because I just don't even know. But going back to Hearthstone, I got into it really, really late, about a year or two after it was released, and I was constantly going up against decks that weren't basic decks. I was only stuck with basic cards and decks, the ones that you start out with, and it was just so annoying to go against decks that weren't them, and you just don't know what to expect or even understand what the cards did from a deck. Really, you'd go into a fight understanding what deck it is, and then you'd react to it. But I just didn't know because I'd never played with those cards before, and then I just got so fed up with it that I had to just buy an expansion or two just to keep up with it. And the single player on them is great, but then I kind of regret it because I eventually found out that I just don't like cards games at all. I don't like Magic the Gathering, I don't like Hearthstone at all, really. It's stupid to say. And then later on I just gave up with it because they released a brand new expansion, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to spend 20 quid just to keep up with the meta, and this is no fun at all. So I just quit, and I just didn't really care for it. I just don't care about keeping up with metas if you have to spend so much money on it, even if it is 20-30 quid. And I'm not going to grind for a deck, especially in Hearthstone, because doing that takes so bloody long to do. Just gathering up all the dust and everything is just annoying, especially with the RNG of it, where you're opening card packs, and the RNG on it is just ridiculous. You can never ever get a legendary card. But anyway, in hindsight, I really shouldn't have spent that much money, and I should have just quit while I was ahead. And yeah, Hearthstone can get in the bloody bin.
So a game that I just threw money at, I tend to do this quite a lot because I want to try and play a bit of everything. I want to try and complete as much as possible. So when something comes out and it looks remotely interesting, or it's by a developer that, has some sense of reputation, I'm going to be on it. If it's available at midnight, I'm on it. 51 worldwide games, I'm on it. I don't care. And so with all the current situation going on of just being stuck in the same series of rooms week in, week out, and not being that many new releases, in the run up to Last of Us 2, I sort of got into the mentality of just, any game that comes out is a new game if it's new to you. And I threw money at it's ludicrous. I threw money at Homefront: The Revolution recently because I read that it had levels, Time Splitters 2 levels in it at the beginning, but that's not even the worst thing. I threw £35 English at Maneater because I looked at Maneater and I thought, well, that might just be some sort of shark-based goose game. And it's reviewing sort of ish, it's like 6 or 7 out of 10, but I played Jaws Unleashed back in the day and I want to be a shark. And I sort of looked at the trailer for it and I saw all the upgrade paths and you can get lasers and you can get different armor for your shark, and I thought it looks really, really cool, and it's got the voice actor that plays Jerry in Rick and Morty. I love Rick and Morty, maybe there's a little bit of that in there. And I got it, and it plays like hell. And when you put a game on and immediately you can tell that it's just not controlling very well. That game's opening sort of tutorial action scene as you go up against a bunch of ships and then a bunch of people that are on the beach, and it's like, hey, go eat them, go launch yourself out the water and flop around on the beach and eat some people and then try and take out some ships. And that's great in theory, but the targeting system in that game is atrocious because you're underwater, you not only have Z targeting, back and forward, but you also have up and down. You're trying to angle shots up and down. You're trying to launch out the water and then come back down on people. The frame rate's all over the place. Nothing feels satisfying. Everything feels just messy. The explosions look terrible. And I immediately thought, oh, what have I done? I money first and I asked questions later. And since I've gone online and Googled stuff and looked at the reviews, the sort of review that I could be putting out, would class this as a review. It is a very 6 out of 10 game. It's not that it's completely devoid of any enjoyment, but I thought it would be a lot more polished. And comparisons to Goose Game should only be made in terms of it's an animal game where you play as the animal. Other than that, not a remote sense of charm that Goose Game had in spades. So yeah, Mania, don't go anywhere near it, to be honest.
So I'm actually speaking for two of us today. So Jules, say yeah if you think I'm much cooler than you.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. So the game that I regret throwing money at is a title I was super excited for last year, and as was Jules.
Yeah.
And that was Wolfenstein Youngblood. I'm a huge fan of the rebooted Wolfenstein games. They are some of the most surprising titles that have come out over the course of the end of last gen and throughout the current gen. But when Youngblood came around, it was exciting, but then it turned out to not necessarily be what we expected to be, and I went out of my way to get the deluxe edition of the game, to get the whole buddy pass thing so I could play it with Jules and stream it as well. And we were both really excited. We jumped in the game and got to the first level and it was like, oh, this is cool. And then when the game opened up into what it really was, it wasn't what we were actually expecting, was it?
Yeah.
So Youngblood was very much marketed like it was going to be another sort of very narrative, not necessarily linear because the levels were always open, and even more so with Arcane on board for Youngblood, but we were expecting a linear story-based Wolfenstein experience, but instead we got this weird level grind hub world thing that just no one wanted or even expected.
Yeah.
And the fact that I paid extra to get Jules to come and play it with me, because like I said, we were excited, and I was excited to have a game that played as well as Wolfenstein in a co-op sense. I mean, that makes perfect sense, but then again, so did Fallout 76 in my opinion, multiplayer Fallout. Why wouldn't I want that? But unfortunately, it just did not come to fruition, and it remains to be one of the most disappointing games of 2019.
Yeah.